Do you want to improve your workout performance and your VO2 max? Well, today I'll insert this electronic pill down where the sun don't shine to test a device that claims to help you do this. The creators of the new Core 2 sensor claim that you can track your core body temperature, so the temperature deep inside your body, using this sensor attached to your skin, which is quite impressive if it's true, since your skin temperature is very different from your core body temperature. Tracking core body temperature can be important for athletes, since there's some evidence that training systematically at higher temperatures can help significantly improve your performance. Unfortunately, normally tracking your core body temperature is generally not that convenient. Your parents might have used one of these, for instance, when you were a baby to check for a fever. However, exercising with one of these isn't that comfortable, so an alternative is a smaller electronic pill like this one that you can either swallow or insert up into your body in the other direction, both of which have their disadvantages. In this video, I'll take one for the team and test if the new Core 2 sensor functions just as well as inserting this pill up my you-know-what. We'll also see if the new generation 2 of the Core sensor does significantly better than the older generation 1. And you might be wondering why I'm wearing this full bodysuit right here. Well, this is actually a heat suit that allows you to artificially train at higher core body temperatures. Core actually sent me this along with the Core 2 sensor in order to be able to test a new sensor at higher temperatures, though they might have just overdone it a bit in terms of branding. Just to be clear, Core sent me this sensor to test, but they don't have any influence at all on the video or the testing, and they didn't get to see the video before release. Okay, but before getting to the results, let's get out of this suit. Okay, that feels better. We'll test the Core 2 sensor in 3 different scenarios. First, of course, we'll test it during a workout. Specifically, we'll test it during indoor cycling with the heat suit on. Unfortunately, I injured my groin a little bit, so I can only do limited amounts and types of exercises, so no running for a few days, maybe even weeks, though I'm not sure I'd actually want to go out in a heat suit. Second, I'll test the Core sensor while sleeping, since core body temperature is actually quite important in regulating your sleep patterns. And finally, we'll test how good this sensor is at measuring the temperature just during daily life. I don't think there are actually that many use cases for this, but I'm just curious how good the Core sensor can pick up on these patterns. Before getting to the actual testing, let's briefly discuss what the Core 2 sensor actually is and how it's different from the generation 1 Core sensor. Now, the Core 2 sensor is supposed to be worn directly on the skin, so actually down here directly on the skin, and it's designed to be attached to an ECG chest strap, so one of those heart rate monitors you wear around your chest. The new Core 2 sensor likely has an advantage in terms of durability over this older generation sensor, since this old one has these relatively thin arms here on the outside, and for me, one of them actually snapped just from normal usage. I've been using the Core 1 on a daily basis for quite some time, but still the fact that it snapped at some point isn't good. I was able to glue and tape it back together though, so it still works. The downside of the new Core 2 is that you actually have to remove it completely from the chest strap to charge it, which wasn't the case with the old sensor. The Core 2 is 48% smaller and 30% lighter than its predecessor, the Core 1, though I honestly don't notice it at all when wearing it. I wouldn't say either is more or less comfortable. Core says that the retail price for the Core 2 sensor will be the same as the Core 1 has now at 270 Swiss francs. There's no clear price yet as I'm recording this video for the other regions, but by directly converting into dollars, that would be about $300. For connectivity, the Core 2 offers Bluetooth and N+ compatibility similar to the Core 1, allowing you to connect to iOS, Android, Garmin, Wahoo, and other devices for real-time access to the data. I generally use a Garmin watch with the Core 1, and it also works with the Core 2. In general, I get the impression that the Core 2 is an incremental improvement over the Core 1, but nothing too major has changed. There is a new LED indicator that provides quick updates on the device status, battery life, and charging process, which is nice. Core also says that the Core 2 hardware is supposed to be future ready, meaning it should be ready for upcoming software updates, though we don't know what those are and if they're also coming to the Core 1. So now that you know what the Core sensor is and how to use it, let's start with the testing. And I want to start with what is potentially the most important test. Can the Core sensor keep track of your core body temperature during intense heat training activities? In order to do this, I did a 1-hour workout on my indoor trainer while wearing the heat suit. At the same time, I used the temperature measurement pill inserted into my body from down below. The pill itself is actually a passive sensor, and I wear this belt around my waist that has all the batteries and storage. And here we have the results for that indoor cycling session with the temperature as measured by the pill in black right here. And then we have the Core 1 in blue and the new Core 2 in red, with on the left the temperature in degrees Celsius and on the right the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, which is objectively a worse unit. I would say here that I think that the absolute temperature differences between the black line and the blue and red line aren't that important, because also the pill has some deviation in that regard. It's the temperature changes that it can detect very accurately, and that should be the same in the Core 1 and the Core 2 sensor. The shapes of both graphs and also the moment they have inflections look very similar. similar, and the Core 2 and Core 1 sensor basically gave the same result, and as I said, they generally also follow along quite well with the black line. The only major difference I see is this downward turn here for a little bit in the Core 1 and Core 2 sensor that isn't there for the pill sensor. I'm not sure why that is there or what would cause that difference, but overall the patterns are very similar, so I have not much to complain about here. It is very important to say here that in order to get the most precise data during sports activities, Core highly recommends pairing with a heart rate monitor, which is also what I did right here. So I had a chest strap connected to the Core app as well. Heart rate helps the sensor accurately convert measured heat flux into core body temperature, so I'd really recommend also getting a heart rate monitor. Now, to show you that skin temperature and core body temperature are very different, let's also plot my skin temperature. And those results are plotted right here, so the range of the axis is quite a bit wider now, so we still have the same data for the Core 1, Core 2 and the pill, but now also with these dashed, somewhat transparent lines, we also have the skin temperature of the Core 1 and Core 2. And as you can see, there are drastic differences between skin temperature and actually core body temperature. Skin temperature had a much wider range than core body temperature. So skin temperature ranged from roughly 30 degrees Celsius to 37 degrees Celsius, which is roughly 86 to close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So really a wide range. This makes sense, of course, as your organs and also in general your individual cells have relatively tight temperature requirements. And in addition, this also shows that wearables that might measure your skin temperature do not necessarily also reflect the temperature inside your body. I think sort of the average over a night might say something about you having a fever, and it might also be able to track your cycle, but a lot more computation is needed to actually get to your core body temperature. And in addition to the overview we just had, we can also directly plot the temperature according to the pill against the temperature as measured by the core sensors. And we can clearly see there's a strong correlation between the core sensors and the pill sensors. There is this absolute deviation, but again, here the pill might also be wrong. But overall, this looks very good. And just for my European friends, here we also have the same plot, but now in degrees Celsius. Of course, the plot doesn't really change, only the axis change. But I think this really shows that the core has potential for tracking your core body temperature. So during sports, at least based on this test, the temperature measurements of the Core 2 sensor appear to be quite reliable, though not really any better than the previous generation 1 sensor. So based on this, I wouldn't really see any reason to upgrade. But what about during less intense changes in core body temperature? Can the Core 2 sensor also detect your temperature then? Let's start with sleep. But first, if you're finding these videos interesting, it really helps me get access to new devices sooner and helps me reach more people if you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Pressing those two buttons really makes a huge difference, and commenting of course also helps. I would really appreciate it, so thanks in advance. Garmin, for instance, has never sent me a watch before release, which is why my reviews are always later than those of other reviewers. Getting more subscribers is one way to convince them, but back to the testing.
Good morning. I know I don't look at my best right now, but I'm so happy the data seems to be collected. So I wore both the core and this rectal pill during the night. So I wanted to see if the temperature as measured in my rectum matches the temperature of the core sensors. So you can see here I'm working with this sort of ancient laptop that needs to extract the data from this 3D printed part. And it always is a bit of a gamble if it works, but it seems to have worked this time. So I have more or less complete data from both the core and the pill. So let's see now if the data actually agrees, because I also haven't looked at the data yet. And I hope that the core did well, because it's a lot easier to use than this pill.
Now, during everyday activities or not during sports, you can or maybe even should wear the core sensor without a heart rate monitor. So that's what I did. And here we have the results during my first night of sleep. Again, in black, we have the temperature according to the pill, and in blue and red, the Core 1 and Core 2 sensor. Now, first of all, again, we can see that the Core 1 and Core 2 sensor gave very similar results. Now, in this case, their calibration might have been slightly different, so there's an absolute deviation between the two, but the patterns look very similar. And I would say that overall, these patterns are also very similar to the patterns of the pill sensor, though there is a bit more deviation compared to what we saw before. And I think the major difference is here in this beginning part right here. All these sensors do actually show the expected sleep temperature patterns. So as you fall asleep, your core body temperature actually drops. This also helps with deep sleep. And then as you get closer to waking up, your core body temperature rises again, which also helps you wake up more naturally. And all of these sensors indeed show this kind of hammock pattern as you expect, but the details are different. The pill temperature actually had a very quick drop in temperature here in the beginning, and then a slower drop as the night progressed. And then about halfway through the night, or 3 hours in the night, it started rising again. And that part is super similar to the Core 1 and Core 2. But the core 1 and core 2 showed a much slower decline in temperature overall. So they didn't have this quick kind of drop, but a much more gradual decline. It's not a major difference, but it is quite a clear difference. But still, I'm happy to see that these overall drops and rises match, and that sort of the lowest point is at the same part of the night. And these natural dips and increases in sleep temperature as the night progresses are actually inspiration behind temperature-controlled beds, like for instance the 8-sleep pod, which can actively heat and cool the bed. So they actually cool you more here in the middle of your sleep and also heat you more at the end of the night to potentially help you sleep better and also wake up more easily, though much more research is still needed to see if and how much that helps. I really love my 8-sleep pod, but mostly because I'm a quite hot sleeper and it really helps me cool down and sleep much more calm, especially in summer. And if I have a partner, she can set her side independently of mine, so both people in the bed can have their own temperature set in a nice temperature controlled environment. If you want to know more about the 8-sleep pod, check out my video up here and my discount affiliate link below. But let's get back to these graphs. What about skin temperature? Was that more similar than we saw for exercising, or again very different from core body temperature? Well, that is displayed right here. And again, we see drastic differences. So the core body temperature has this hammock shape where skin temperature actually rises, then stayed more or less stable and then dropped again. So almost the opposite from the core body temperature. And I actually also recorded a second night, or tried to at least, but after about 2 or 3 hours, the signal was lost or the battery ran out, but I still want to show it to you. And that's displayed right here. So we only have about an hour and a half, 2 hours of data, but we can clearly see that drop in temperature as I fell asleep. But luckily in this case, both the core 1 in blue and the core 2 in red showed similar velocities in decrease of temperature. So sort of that gradient is very similar. And in this case, the core 2 might actually have done a bit better than the core 1. So the overall shape here of the core 2 looks very similar to that of the pill sensor. But still the core 1 isn't bad either. Overall, I'd say for both nights, quite a decent result. Finally, what about your day-to-day waking temperature? Can the core sensor measure this? Well, before looking at those results, since you're still here, I'm trying to find out how happy people are with the different brands of wearables using a short questionnaire. If you own a smartwatch or another health tracker and you want to help me find out which device people are most happy with, it would be great if you could fill out the Google form link below. It's completely anonymous. Thanks in advance, and let's get back to the testing. And here we have the daytime results where we have quite a decent amount of data, so about 6 hours of data, with again the pill in black, the core 2 in red and the core 1 in blue. The first thing I want to point out right here, this dip here is actually some missing data, and then I might have had to use a new sensor because of, well, natural processes, so that had to heat up again a bit to normal body temperature, so we ignore this dip right here. But the first thing you will notice is that in general there wasn't a lot of variation in temperature. So my temperature maybe varied between 36.5 and 37.5 degrees Celsius. So not that much, only 1 degree Celsius or 2 degrees Fahrenheit of total variation over about 6 hours. So not a lot. And overall, I would say the general patterns maybe match between both of the core sensors and that black line, though it's not perfect by any means. I would say both of them picked up on this major peak right here, though this dip wasn't fully detected right here by the blue line. The blue line, which represents the older core 1, actually showed a continuous increase right here, where there was actually a bit of a decrease here in the beginning, then indeed a peak here in the middle, and then again a dip here followed by an increase, which wasn't really detected by the core 1. The core 2 might have done a bit better, I would say. It's a bit more stable right here, not fully detecting the dip, but partially detecting it. Also detecting this peak right here, and also right here it's more or less stable, maybe a bit too stable. So I'm not sure if for this use case, if for some reason you want to track these tiny bits of variation, if either the core 1 or core 2 is good enough. There might be some minor evidence that the core 2 is a little bit better here, but I think much more data is needed to make that conclusion right here. Based on this data, I would say that both during workouts and likely during sleep, the core 2 sensor appears to provide relatively reliable data. But now that we know that the core 2 sensor appears to be accurate enough, how can we actually use it? Well, there are two main situations that Core recommends that you use it: during training and during competitions. During training, Core recommends that you use it to gradually expose yourself to enough heat, aiming to improve your ability to perform in hot conditions. The plan involves progressively increasing the duration and intensity of that heat exposure during workouts.
I was actually going over the first edit that my editor Alex had created, and I realized I didn't explain how to use the Core in competition, or at least how Core recommends you use it. They actually then recommend you try to stay in the lower zones, so the lower heat zones, not to overexert your body that way. So basically you train in the hot, and during the competition you try to stay in the cool. But back to pass, Rob.
course defines some metrics that they say should help you do this. First of all, Core defines something called a heat strain index, which is meant to help you understand your body's response to heat. Heat strain actually refers to the physiological processes that work to cool your body. The more effort your body expends to cooling itself, the greater the strain and impact on your performance. Core actually tries at least to quantify this strain in real time with an algorithm that combines all of the data it gathers. Your heat strain index falls into one of 4 heat zones, with zone 3, the heat training zone, triggering physiological adaptations that enhance your performance. Time spent in each of these zones is tracked through the Core app, providing you with sort of an overview of your total heat exposure. Second, there's the heat training load, which is a daily measure scaled from 0 to 10, reflecting how much time you spent in zone 3. One example of a training that could give you some good results is training, for instance, for 2 to 3 sessions per week with 45 to 60 minutes in the heat training zone. Consecutive days with an elevated heat training load boost your heat adaptation score, another metric. This is a metric that quantifies your heat adaptation on a scale from 0 to 100%, so a lot of different metrics. The Core app says it can use all these scores to guide your training to significantly enhance your body's ability to adapt to heat and improve your endurance and reducing the risk of heat-related performance losses. Of course, it's difficult to say how much you will actually gain, but that is their claim. There is some evidence that if you follow such a protocol, this could improve your performance by enhancing cardiovascular efficiency and also increasing your hemoglobin mass, leading to better oxygen transport and endurance. This actually could also help you increase your VO2 max, which could be important since that is associated with cardiovascular performance and longevity. I actually recently tested the ability of some devices like the Whoop strap and the Apple Watch to measure your VO2 max, which you can find linked up here or also down in the description below. Hi, Rob from the future here. I just wanted to add a few remarks and clarify some things after just having a webinar from the Core team. First off, according to them, the Core 1 and Core 2 sensor should be about similar in terms of accuracy, or potentially the Core 2 actually has slightly better performance, so that matches my findings in general. Second, I somehow completely missed this, but you can actually slide the heart rate strap through this plastic sleeve thingy, which then stays attached no matter what, and then you can still detach the Core sensor and then reattach it relatively easily. You of course still need to pop out the actual sensor to charge it, so it's still a bit more inconvenient than before, but a lot easier than initially made it seem. The third thing that the Core team mentioned and showed is how the heat zones are actually defined. You can see that in this graph right here. So the zones are a combination of skin temperature and core temperature. The fourth thing I wanted to clarify is that of course you can connect your Core sensor to different Garmin wearables, but now there's an update available that should allow you to better see all the Core metrics that they define in the Garmin data fields. Also, any data collected with a Garmin device should sync to the Core app if you make sure that Garmin is added to your connected apps within the Core app. Also, Zwift and Training Peak integration should come soon. The final thing I want to clarify is about the metrics of the Core sensor, not about how they are calculated, but where they are calculated. Many of them are calculated on the sensor itself, so you can see them also on your Garmin watch, for instance, but some metrics are actually calculated remotely, so not on the sensor itself, so you shouldn't be able to see them on your Garmin watch, and there might be some delay to them showing up in the Core app. I just wanted to fill you in on the final details, but back to past Rob. Now, if you do end up getting a Core sensor, a Whoop strap, an Oura ring, an HT-Pod 4, another device, or anything at all on Amazon for that matter, even something as small as toilet paper, and you want to support the channel and save some money, there are different discount affiliate links in the description below. Now, given that you watched this whole video on the Core sensor, I think you will like this video on the Garmin Fenix 8 or this video on the Whoop strap.